Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Weekly Review. I'm your host, Paul Hazard, and with me this week is our esteemed panel, Leanne Lax, Brent Poland, and John Gibbs. Good morning to you all.
Outstanding, a world-class vision, a world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Good morning again. Now, before we start the show, I need to make a very serious announcement. In line with my duties as a radio host, I have to admit that I have been given gifts, freebies. Yes, I have been given a TTR t-shirt. Now, this is all legal. It's above board, but I do know that the optics do not look good. Especially when you consider I wanted a TTR mug. However, I am released from all kinds of legal obligations now, and if the good people at Manchester United would like to provide me with a box on match days, I am free to take it up. Anyway, enough silliness from me. We'll be right back with some serious stories after these messages from our sponsors.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. John Catt have an exceptional collection of book titles that cover a range of educational topics, ideas and research. The books are aimed at forward-thinking schools and support best practice teaching for both primary and secondary education. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order.
How can you show your students the opportunities that await them? How can you fuel their aspirations and motivate them to achieve? Futurum Careers provides a wealth of stimulating resources aimed at encouraging 14 to 19-year-olds to pursue careers in STEM and SHAPE. We help you to show your students what they can aim for and how. From articles to activity sheets, animations to podcasts, all our resources align with Gatsby benchmarks and are free for you and your students to download. Visit futurumcareers.com and subscribe today. Futurum Careers, helping teachers to inspire the next generation.
Introducing Reading Solutions UK, home to Dreambox Reading Plus, the online reading development programme, improving outcomes for students and schools nationwide. Create stronger readers in your school from Key Stage 2 to beyond GCSE, using Reading Plus's evidence-based adaptive technology. Reading Plus accurately assesses your students' skills gaps and places them on a personalised learning pathway, built to accelerate their strengths and improve on their areas for development. You can try the programme with a free 4-week pilot today. Search Reading Solutions UK to find their website and request your free pilot today.
It's autumn and it's the season for political party conferences. This week we had the Labour Party conference. Now, I remember a time when political party conferences were televised live, and as a student you would sit around, you would watch them and you would chat about them and discuss them. Mind you, there were only 4 channels in those days, but nowadays you have to go looking for them almost. They're such kind of damp squib kind of affairs, maybe. Brent, what are your thoughts and takeaways from the Labour Party conference this week?
A bit of a mixed bag. It's a bit sad that education, much like the general election, was overshadowed by all the other shenanigans that the governing party seem to be up to these days. And much like the general election, education didn't feature as high in the sort of media rounds or equally in radical policies, which I find deeply ironic because the Labour government came in on a promise of change, and the first thing says is don't be expecting a big bang approach to changing curriculum, which I find sort of a hold on, you're all about change, but you're not going to change that much. Right. So there's a little bit of a kind of style over substance there. Some contradictions riddled through as well. We've got lots of things have been said, lots of good promises, lots of acknowledgement. We got thank yous as well. Thank you to the teaching profession. But then again, the last government thanked us while underfunding us for 14 years. There was a recognition of societal problems. I did like the quote from the Education Secretary when she said, you know, that your maths teacher was having to be a mental health counsellor because of the services that have dried up around the area. So there's a definite understanding that education is not in isolation, and that the mission creep that is teaching, which is our third story, cannot be sustained, because what are we as educators? We're just doing far too much. But again, nice that it's mentioned, but no plan to kind of stop that happening. So we got an understanding of, you know, we'll work with unions. You've got your pay rise, which hasn't happened yet, but it's going through. Lots of really nice things said about, or, you know, saying what is happening and recognizing that the schools are crumbling, but where's the cavalry? Where's the building teams coming in to fix that? So a recognition of what's happening in schools, but also a kind of like, wait, change is coming, but we're going to do it slowly, ironically, which is completely the opposite of the whole banner behind the Education Secretary who says the word change, which I don't think there is that much change. It's a bit more style over substance. One last thing which really irks me is that my first time protesting in 1997 was to protest against tuition fees. And we hear all about education, how important it is, and we heard all those things, and then only to hear leaked information talking about a 13% increase in tuition fees rises. And that is completely contradictory to us as educators saying, let's get working class kids, let's close the social mobility gap, and then have a Labour government who brought in tuition fees in the first place, then talk about all those great things, and then undermine us completely by putting up tuition fees. So I think, I don't know if it's joined up thinking. I think they're saying some of the right things, but it's such a mess. I don't get the vision of what they want. I think they know what they want to do, but I don't think they have A, the time, nor B, the resources, and C, they don't simply have enough staff in school. And the first thing they haven't addressed is, where's the cavalry? Where's the 6,500 teachers? And I didn't hear any mention of recruitment or retention. It was almost completely missing from anything whatsoever, the recognition that we are short-staffed in school.
Mm-hmm. And that's going to be a bit of a theme running through our three stories this morning. John, what about you? What are your main takeaways from the conference?
Well, absolutely, just to endorse and agree with what Brent has just said. I think that's exactly my overall impression. A kind of sense of, and I'm trying to resist it, to be honest. I think to myself, all these years with Labour out of power, and I was looking forward to them being back in power, voted for them, wanted to be in power. I was sitting anxiously on election night for the poll to come out as the exit poll. And you have to then steel yourself to not be disappointed too quickly. And it's been pretty difficult this week, as we've said. You know, I mean, some of the stuff that has gone on around Keir Starmer and so on, which you, Paul, alluded to as we started. So it's hard not to feel a bit like, well, for goodness sake, let's get on. Yes, probation service needs money, the health service needs money, the economy is flatlining. We've had years of looking back on austerity as an absolute disaster. So I get it, you know, as it were, that the government has come in with one of the worst possible legacies that a government could have. And yet, where is that vision? Where is the, you know, if we're going to see light at the end of the tunnel, it's going to get better one day and all that stuff. But what will schools look like? Well, we'll have more teachers. We know that. Yeah, we want more. I like the scorecard for Ofsted. I like the emphasis on creativity in schools. They're saying lots of good things, and that's good. And I don't want to underplay the change in mood. A government that appears to be on the side of schools. That's all good. And again, I have to just resist my cynicism and my desire for something bigger, something more. I mean, I want to see trusts swept away. I want to see a complete rethinking of the examination system. I want them to radically change the schools in this country. I won't get that because that's the sort of stuff I think when I'm in the shower probably, and that's not going to happen. You know, I'm not going to get that. But it's It's better than it was, and they're not the Tories, and their heart is in the right place.
Thank you. Yeah. Leanne, what about you? What are your main takeaways from the conference this week?
I think I agree with both Brent and John. I think on John's point, and when I looked at Bridget Phillipson's speech, I saw a lot of thank yous, thank you this, thank you that, thank you. It's like, but you're welcome. I don't think many of us do it for a thank you. We do it for the kids, and we do it to see a difference it makes in the kids. It's kind of like the claps for the NHS during COVID. We're not doing it for claps, and we're not really doing it for thank yous. They are nice. It's not really why that's not why we're doing it. Kind of to go back to Brent's point of, there's going to be there's this big bang change, and we're going to do slow change. But the minute they got into power, they announced a curriculum review. And I think, why a curriculum review? And I think to myself, well, the national curriculum is a document. And if they review the curriculum and they change the curriculum, they have like a tangible piece of change that they have done. I don't know, maybe that's a bit, it's a pessimistic way to look at it. But I think that you have a tangible piece of change. I know someone, Sarah Smith, one of their national mission champions. Sounds like something you would do in high school, and the teacher would be like, it'll look good on your CV, you should do it. Anyway, she said we should be open-minded about tackling challenges. There's no simple answers. And I just think if you speak to teachers, you probably would get simple answers, because we need help with the behaviour. Inclusion seems to be massive at the moment, and I believe in inclusion if it's done correctly. I don't think curriculum change affects any of that.
Yeah. So in conclusion, listening to all three of you, perhaps Labour should listen to TTR hosts, and in particular the weekly review. We'll be right back with our next story. Now, still with the Labour Party conference, there was a fringe event at which mega mat leader Bex Boomer Clark, what a fantastic name, told attendees that directed time, the 1265 hours, that nobody sticks to, by the way, everybody surpasses enormously, that's a really archaic way to look at the profession. Now, this is a comment taken out of isolation or taken in isolation and put as a headline, to attract readers, but it's part of a broader conversation about teacher recruitment, working conditions, and professionalism. And I think, those are three key things. We probably alluded to them in the previous story, three things that need looked at. But Leanne, before we get on to the wider issues, would removing that directed time figure, the 1265 hours, would that improve outcomes, conditions, and morale for teachers?
I don't know that it's that relevant, because every teacher has their own different workload, and if you don't complete your workload, I think it's the only profession. We said this on Education Tonight. I said it's the only profession where you have to do work to be able to do your work, and then after you've done your work, you have more work to do. So if I don't do the first round of work, planning, preparation, differentiation, then I can't teach the lesson. I could teach it, but I probably wouldn't teach it to the best of all the children. So I think what I took from it was meaningful flexibility. And I think there is something maybe within that, they talk about Gen Z? Is that the new generation? Coming in and Gen Z.
We call them Gen Z, do we? Yeah, I think we do.
Coming in and wanting flexibility and fluidity and a sense of purpose. And I just thought, that's not just them. We all want that. Just some of us have been in it so long that we're like, well, we have to do the work. So I think there is something within that meaningful flexibility. We spoke about, like on the Thursday, PPA at home. I don't know that that's meaningful flexibility. I'm not even sure it's possible in the profession, but there is something in, there is a bunch of work. There's a teacher you have to get done, because if you don't do it on Monday, then Leanne on Tuesday is going to suffer, really. So there is that I think is a difficult one. I think Labour said there's no easy answers. This is an easy answer. It's a difficult fix, I think.
Yeah, good point. teaching never ends, Stuart, doesn't, and we always feel, you know, we could have done that better or we do that differently, and we're always kind of criticizing ourselves and trying to improve, and there's that endless cycle.
Bit of a hamster wheel.
Yeah, the hamster wheel, which means we can never really put the job down and relax. Brent, Bex Boomer Clark is in charge of a huge multi-academy trust. They employ 4,500 people. You know, is there some cynicism here? Is she foreseeing a recruitment crisis, and is she kind of putting her oar in now to make sure that she kind of gets people for the future, so that, you know, that year 11 class isn't taught by somebody appropriate?
I think she's completely tone deaf to the profession. I think she needs to reflect on her workforce. This is what you get when you semi-privatize education. It's like the factory owner who lives in the Bahamas, in the tax haven, lecturing the factory workers on how their productivity. Get on with it, you minions. Work harder. And I mean, it's disgraceful. It's just symptomatic of what's wrong with education. And no, you know, 1265 is a maximum you should be working. But the thing that's good about 1265 is it sets that standard for the rest of the staff room to say, this is when I work, this is when I don't work. Say that extra parents' evening you want to squeeze in. No, it's beyond 1265 and I'm not doing it. And as a union rep, I can tell you, one of my top jobs is come June, July, I'm scrutinizing the 1265 document that comes back, and my senior management is getting every minute counted back from me, because my staff will then say to me, right, is that beyond 1265? Absolutely. No, we're a vocational teaching. So I don't like minute counting either. There has to be some flexibility. There has to be some understanding of the nature of roles. So it's up to individuals. I stay behind probably longer than some other members of staff to do my work after school, because then I don't want to bring it home at the weekend. So you do have to have a little bit of give in that, and you do have to have a little bit of reciprocity. And teaching is built on relationships like that. But the thing with 1265 is it sets a standard that there's the line you do not cross. So most schools should go under 1265 to build that little bit of leeway in, then build those relationships, and then ask, not demand. I think this really management trend, maybe go on one of those big CEO days, yeah, where they sip some wine and do some paintballing or something like that, and learn how to manage properly, because I'm sure the workforce and her are probably delighted to hear that they're not working hard enough, while she's probably on 400 grand. So no, I would send her directly, pipe down, do your job, get into a classroom. You don't think it's good enough, you do a week as a teacher, and I'll give you a week as a CEO, and we'd see exactly who would be doing what after that. I'm absolutely furious at this type of thing. And this is exactly, what is this person doing at the Labour fringe? This is the problem. There they are schmoozing at the Labour fringe, probably again, who knows. And that is disgusting, that there they are lecturing, trying to put pressure on the government. While on one hand we hear Bridget Phillips is saying one thing, while we have CEOs basically demanding the government puts the screws on teachers to get us to work harder. Oh, come on, we're working hard enough as it is. So no, the 1265 needs for my bunny needs to come down, not go up. She's going the wrong direction. If we want people to retain people in education, we take the hours down, not put them up. So I think she's completely out of sync with the reality. But that's what you get when you get people in ivory towers directing who have got no public teaching experience. A head teacher would never say that, because a head teacher would know what that would do to staff morale. Sorry.
Perhaps disappointingly, Bex Boomer Clark was a teacher herself, and you would be inclined to think she should know better. Listener Pat, or viewer Pat, tells us that the government should always listen to classroom teachers as experts, and alerts us to the fact that he's spending 3 hours marking right now, which no one will ever see or no one will ever credit to his 1265 hours. So, I mean, I can't see how a teacher can actually do the job and stick to 1265 hours. John, I do have a point for you, but I wonder, do you want to come in on that question I asked Brent about, you know, is there some cynicism here with a former principal who's now a MAT CEO, you know, talking about 1265 hours, and that should be got rid of?
Completely. Yeah, I'm with Brent. You know, in a week where the Prime Minister is having sharp suits bought for him by donors, and fringe meetings that the Labour Party have spoken to by CEOs who are advocating a kind of rampant managerialism, and we've had too much of that. You know, it is the disconnect between the reality, as our computer there came in with a comment, the reality of the classroom and the people in the offices and the managerialists and the people who put up spreadsheets and graphs at staff meetings and point to numbers and not realize the actual experience of what teachers are doing, which is, I taught for just shy of 40 years. And I never knew that there were, I knew the concept of directed time, but I couldn't have given a number to it. When asked how many hours did you work, I would say things like, well, until it's done, kind of thing. But I always assumed there was a Brent out there somewhere. The union was watching out for me, and that I couldn't be exploited because I knew there was a limit. I knew somewhere there was a limit to what I could be told to do. And that I felt was reassuring, even though I worked at weekends and worked in the evenings and went on school trips where it was 24/7, as far as I can tell, on a school trip. Getting up in the middle of the night, telling kids to go back to their rooms. So there was a ridiculous idea that somehow we need greater flexibility. Sorry, Paul, I may have answered your other point there, but what were you going to ask me?
Well, before I do ask you, I have heard Brent say before, teachers' hearts are big. Teachers' hearts are good. They look after the children and they do what's needed. They don't look at their watches, to find out, how long they've put in. Mind you, there are others who will do that. And when 5 o'clock comes, you can very quickly find that people are gone. They're switched off and gone. John, one of the things I wanted to ask you specifically then was, and setting aside, what we've just said about this issue is, what is the right balance then between, remuneration, flexibility, professional development? What does teaching need in terms of balance nowadays?
Well, when the term, I think she's called it flexibility, apparently these Gen Zers want that makes your vitals clench as well. When someone talks about there being a sort of younger generation of Gen Zers, which I don't think I'm in. I'm several generations behind Gen Z. I don't know how far down the alphabet to go get to me. But anyway, they well, I actually have a boomer. And so, but that Gen, the Gen Z managerialism stuff. The idea, so they are calling these young types flexible, unlike me, the old dinosaur. These young types are calling for fluidity and flexibility and so on. I don't disagree with flexibility. It's what Leanne said. If it's meaningful, there's too much rigidity in teaching, too much going to meetings that aren't necessary, too much wasted time, too much being presenteeism to some degree. You could look very creatively and more creatively, especially in the age of IT and so on, about where teachers can teach and how they can teach and how you can make it a more flexible and amenable and less stressful profession. And that could be thought about creativity. So I don't object to that, but that's not what these people mean. When people like managerialists say flexibility, they almost always mean people degrading the quality of degrading their own ability to determine their agency, their personal agency. It means being told, actually, it's the order of flexibility. It means being told to go, where to go, and what to do. So when you hear the rail union saying, well, we don't want a pay rise with greater flexibility, it means reducing the quality of our work. So I don't like the idea of flexibility in the way that she means it.
Yeah. Maybe TTR should have fringe meetings at the party conference next year. Right back with our last story for today. And before we go on to our last story for today, just a quick reminder, if you are watching, you are listening, please send your comments in. Even if we don't talk about them during the show or they appear on a strap line, we do talk about them after the show. Now, philosophy teacher Bernard Andrews, who has been featured on the show previously, responded to a recent report that sets out ways Gen Z can be enticed into teaching. Now, one of the points he makes in a short but wide-ranging response is that teacher identity is in crisis, and that it's very much determined by what's not happening in other professions. So, for example, cutbacks in, social work and therapy, counselling and psychology and so on mean that teachers have to step in, and we have to be kind of makeshift counsellors, social workers, police, doctors and parents almost. It is an identity crisis that we face. John, is the identity crisis real in the job? Is this not part and parcel of our job now? So therefore, that is our identity, to be nurses, to be psychologists, to be social workers.
Yes and no. Yes, but I can't recall a time when people didn't agonize, in a sense, about the expanding nature and the oddly societally defining nature of teaching, that you had, that teaching had things imposed upon it that which society lacked, so teachers gained as a thing to do. That's been true forever. Probably is probably sort of inevitable. There isn't. I remember when I first came into teaching, someone asked me what I did. What are you doing? What do you do as a teacher? And I said, I know things. I tell the students, and then they know them. I was obviously joking, because I knew it was far more than that. And that was, the idea of that observation was that it wasn't true. I was going to do far more than simply the transfer of information and knowledge. I wished it were true. That would be lovely, just to stand there, say stuff, write it down beautifully. That wasn't true, and it never will be true. On the other hand, is there a crisis of identity? Yeah, in terms of status, in terms of the expectation as opposed to the limits of resources. There is a crisis. And when articles call for, or people say, we need to professionalize, or we need to be a profession, I'm always wary with that, because what do they mean? It means different things to different people. And professionalizing can mean, again, excessive managerialism. People in suits pointing at graphs, which is one of my things I don't like. And so I don't want the managerialist profession, but I do want teachers to be respected as people, as our contributor said, who are capable of determining, who are experts in their own way and can be involved with greater agency in what they do. And that might be what I would think of as greater professionalism, greater collegiality, and greater sharing between schools, and those sorts of things. That's what I think of as professionalism. But I know other people think of it as in different ways. But yes, there is a crisis of identity in teaching. Yes.
Yeah. Liam, one of the things the writer puts forward as a solution or a response to a teacher identity crisis, he says, just let teachers teach. Now, it sounds great, but would that work?
I think there'll always be an element of pastoral in teaching, but I think teaching expectations seem to change as society changes. I think the profession hasn't changed with it. I think of like organizational charts, as John said, you have the big bosses sitting in ivory towers with data spreadsheets. And I think, well, maybe in this day and age when the landscape has changed so much and we are having to manage such different behaviors, different children, a variety of different children, maybe it should be less of a management structure and more of a pastoral structure, so no trust bosses and directors of all the different things, and then heads and then deputies and then assistants, and like maybe the salaries are going to the wrong people, and inside our schools we need a bigger pastoral teams.
I like the sound of that. Yeah, it definitely appeals to me. Yeah. Brent, is the future not? But, as cutbacks begin to bite, and inevitably, they will bite harder and so on, is it not a case that then we will pick up more of these responsibilities? We'll have to be more policemen, we'll have to be more doctors, we'll have to be more counsellors, psychologists, and so on. Is the future not bleak in terms of just teach?
I think that's already happened. I think that happened definitely during COVID. I know that my role during COVID was basically community-based as well as the school. But I like that aspect. One of the reasons I went into teaching was to make a difference. I mean, so some staff are like that. Some staff are, altruistically driven towards making a difference. The problem is people like myself have been driven out of education because I'm judged by data. I'm not judged whether that child is happy, well-rounded. So you have a disconnect between people demanding that we do all these things and then judging us on archaic things out of our control, like children's attendance or the data. And then the more you do, the less you're thought of. We are thanked less, paid less, demanded more, respected less. Local newspapers, as soon as a parent doesn't get what they want, they throw you under the bus. Some of my best colleagues used to give so much, got so little back in return, and every relationship's built on reciprocity. Reciprocity from our CEOs, disconnected, from head teachers who are scared for their jobs. So the relationships just aren't there any longer. So you're doing more, getting less, and feeling, less appreciated. And it's just come from top down. And even the children themselves, the children now don't define what a teacher is. I have a children say to me, why are you telling me off my uniform? It's not your job. Why do you care there's chewing gum under your table? It's not your classroom. It is my classroom. It's my tables, and you will clean under my tables. It's not your job. You can't tell me to do that. So I think parents disarm you and say you're the teacher. We're blamed when it suits, and then we're not helped when we need support. So it's a bit of a lonely, isolated existence being a teacher. I feel like we're in the front line trenches with the generals behind us telling us to keep going into attack, run against the bloody machine guns, while we're told, well, keep going at this, thanks very much for your service. And it's just absolutely, completely thankless at the moment. And we do it. This is the problem. We do it because we care. Our altruism is our greatest strength, but it's also being used against us. And I think that's the problem. And I will still do it because kids matter. But sometimes I think I care more about children than the government do. So during COVID, I care more than some of the parents do. I care more than society does. And sometimes you think to yourself, we're the only people standing and helping these children against, your county lines, your radicalization. My God, these kids are really struggling at the moment. And that's why there's nothing more powerful when you sit down with these kids struggling, make them a cup of tea and say, look, it's not my job description. How are you? And I think we've lost that within education. And there is many of us fighting the rearguard action, but we're slowly being picked off by the machine guns of the CEOs and the data managers and all the rest of the bureaucrats. And I'll give you that thing. When I started teaching, the number of staff in my school is still static. The number of children's increased, but the number of people doing bureaucratic jobs has kept increasing year on year on year. But the number of people in the classroom, and I look what I've done the last couple of years, physics, English, history, geography. So I tell you my identity crisis. I don't even know what I teach any longer, never mind. I don't know what I've said to people, what are you a teacher of? I mean, whatever you need me to be at the moment, basically. And that's what, so I'm suffering from a subject identity crisis, whatever the timetable says. What am I this week? I'm reading this week. Great. I struggle to read out loud with and even at one parent, this is going to crack you up, said that the child is struggling in my class because they're struggling to my accent. And I'm like, so my identity crisis is going to be, would you like me to do an American accent, or would you like me to do a British accent? Today, children, I am going to be, I feel like Matthew Kelly, with stars in their eyes. Today, I'm going to be Matthew, a reading teacher with an English accent. Indeed.
That's a whole nother level of differentiation, Brent. You'll need a box on the plan. Accent.
Multi-talented TTR hosts. We can turn our hand to absolutely anything. And maybe fitting in with a comment JBL, a regular viewer and listener to the show, makes, that we should refuse to apologize for the amazing things that we do. And I think absolutely correct. We should own them. If they're being forced and foisted upon us, we should own those things and take some credit for them. But of course, we do bear in mind that a lot of, particularly pastoral responsibilities, that Leanne referred to, it does stress a lot of teachers who haven't been trained in that sort of thing. And maybe it's not their natural outlook and their natural inclination, and they want to, be able to teach history, science, geography, and so on without being overly and additionally stressed by other factors. On that story, that's all we've time for today. We'll be right back with our shows of the week. Lots of great shows on TTR this week. John, what has caught your ear?
Well, I'm going for the Monday's Late Show with Leanne. And now, is it Rhea?
I think it's Ray.
Ray, of course it is Ray. There's no Ray on there. With Ray and Leanne. And I've become quite a fan of this show, actually. It's the second time I've recommended this because of what I like is the relationship between yourself, Leanne, and Ray, and the excellent first 10 minutes, which just, I thought, if I was still teaching, I'd feel reassured that I'm among people who care and are suffering the same kind of difficulties as me, talking about the stresses and the strains and the expectations, all the things we've talked about today, but doing it in a way that was engaging and with a great deal of, tremendous sort of connection between the two of you. One, Ray's from a secondary education, you're from primary education, and it was a nice balance of you just saying, well, yeah, but there's lots of commonalities. The difficulty with this, the theme of this show was how to get kids to keep on writing when they don't really want to, in a society where they write less and less and they're doing this all the time with their thumbs and so on. How do you do that when the examination demands writing? It was a great discussion. It was entertaining because it was so engaging. Thank you.
Yes, TTR duos is becoming something of a thing, isn't it? You know, we've had Brent and Adam for ages, and that's great. We've got Hannah and Lucy, and that's great and hilarious. And this week we had Brent and Leanne, and that's a fantastic show. Leanne, what's caught your ear this week?
Mine is the Friday morning break with Carl Smith. Was the Senko survival kit. There were just loads of things to pick out. Most importantly, 1.7 million kids with SEN, 8 months for an EHCP, but also, and it's in his tagline actually too. So she says, his guest, be the Senko, not the Senko. So Sendu, sorry. So if you are the Senko, you can't do everything. You have to coordinate. You can't always be the hero of the story, but you can coordinate and delegate, I guess, to other people and to acknowledge that there isn't a magic wand, especially I think when it comes to Sen. Some parts of the system can't be fixed, and in that job you need to have your priorities going into it. Some things I think are more fixable, some things take more time. So it was a very good show. Even if you're not a Senko, it was a very good show, a good take on what it is to be a Senko.
And an hour or two after Carl's show was Claire Cannon's Friday Twilight show, which had the great title Trends in Send. I really liked that. Very informative show about special education needs. I learned a lot. What I really liked about Claire's approach was she had a great emphasis on pupils and, you know, what it was like for pupils in a classroom. It was a solo show, but she did have some company. Her two spaniels, Kelt and Sasta, decided that when the neighbor was having a pizza delivered, they decided they would make themselves known and bark. And my goodness, can they bark, especially Kelt. Great show. I recommend it to everybody. Brent, what have you been listening to?
Friday again. Yeah, Friday was a good day for Teachers Talk Radio. So with Friday Late Show with Dave Brown, it's good to see Dave back on. He's had a bit of a hiatus, but his first show back and loaded with 3 guests, which was fantastic. So he's been building up to this for a while. And the timing of what he was saying was perfect for, ironically, the Labour conference talking about the subjects that have been squeezed out of the curriculum. And one in particular is PE and the difference between PE and physical education. So he had Dr. Gary Strider, Dr. Vicky Randall and Will Swids on to talk about how it's been squeezed out, how it's been done in tokenism. And of course, how important it is, how the physical side of our children and how it's been neglected. And I completely agree with that. When you look at the 2012 kind of Olympic sort of promises and the sports legacy that was promised, our children aren't getting the best sports facilities. They aren't getting really good, deep PE lessons. And sometimes it is just squeezed in the curriculum. It's overloaded with other subjects. So it's really good to see that case being fought for, because it is one of the subjects I have previously taught. And as a former school coach, another job I've done in my past, sports. I love sports. I mean, I think I do get angry when I see subjects like sports, arts, the creative subjects as well getting squeezed out of the curriculum. I think it's well worth the discussion to listen to schools who are thinking of, let's bring back some more actual meaningful PE lessons and meaningful sports, and load it with experts who are pretty much passionately arguing the case.
part of the Labour promise too, which I don't think we got on today, to bring more sports, art, music, and so on to schools. And we'll see if that happens. 3 great shows, live shows on TTR today, and lots more to come up over the week. That's all we have time for today on the Weekly Review. Thank you to our sponsors, John Catt Books, Futurum Careers, and Reading Solutions. And special thanks to this week's panelists, Leanne, Brent, and John. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next Sunday on the Weekly Review, same time, same place.
Outstanding and world-class vision, world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my